Welcome to today's class. Today I'll be talking about material identification in the store. So remember, when materials come into the store, the next step is to store those materials. And after storing the materials, you must identify the materials in the store. How then do you identify materials in the store? So it's always important for you to label your materials so that at the end of the day, you need to create a systematic way of identifying your materials in the store. So therefore, today I'll talk about the material identification. So basically, material identification involves a systematic, concise representation of equipment, raw materials, tools, spare parts, supplies in the organization. And by so doing, the best way to represent your materials is by the use of coding. So coding, by definition, is the process of assigning symbols to the parts. So when you're assigning symbols to the parts of the organization or materials of the organization, that process is referred to as coding. Coding can also be defined as the process of allocating symbols to the parts. Alternatively, it can also be defined as the symbol that represents the design characteristic of part, manufacturing attributes, or both. So coding is very key when you're coming up with identification of materials in the store. Therefore, every item that enters the store must have a code, a unique way of identifying your materials. Different organizations have different way of identifying the materials within their store. The other thing I'm going to talk about are the importance of coding. Why is it important to code your materials? Due to industrial requirements, organizations has to store large number of materials. Therefore, they should have some form of identifying those materials through coding. There are some organizations like supermarkets, for example, they store a very huge amount of data or a very huge amount of materials. And remember, when you're doing manual identification, sometimes it becomes very difficult for your organization to do that. Therefore, organizations have come up with ways of coding their materials. By so doing, they will be able to identify large amounts of materials by just clicking a button, and they're able to identify. The other thing about coding is that it allows classification and codification of materials, which follows a particular step of maintaining stores in a systematic way. So you'll be able to maintain stores by classifying and coding your materials. The other important thing about coding is that it allows materials that are coded to be stored in such a way that ensures easy issuing, identifying materials very easily in the store. So coding allows you to identify materials more easily in the store. So what are some of the criteria of an effective coding? So when you are coming up with a code, it's always important for you to ensure the code is simple. So you must ensure your coding is simple. Simple in the sense that it is easy to understand. So remember, in any organization we have new employees that come on board. So when those employees come on board, are they able to understand your code? Are they able to relate with your code? So that code must be simple to understand. The other thing about coding is that a code should be unique. Different organizations have different coding system. So this coding system must be unique from another organization. Some organizations use numbers, others use letters. So depending on how the organization has designed its coding, you can decide to use numbers, but that code should be unique and identified by your own organization. The other thing about coding is that it should be compact, concise, and consistent. So when you're coding material, you must be consistent. If you're using numbers, let it be numbers only. If you're using letters, let it be letters only. If you're using both letters and numbers, ensure you are consistent. The other thing is that code should be sufficiently flexible to meet future demands. Remember, demand sometimes, due to technology and what have you, the future is uncertain. So when you're coming up with your coding system, it is always good to ensure flexibility. Flexibility in the sense that when we have future demands and the code is supposed to be changed, is it flexible to change the code during that time? So it is always good to have a flexible coding system. The other important thing that I'm going to talk about today is the objective of coding. So coding is very key in any organization. Therefore, one of the objectives of coding is to bring all similar items together, under one classification or group. So coding allows you to bring similar items together under one classification. If there are food items, are you able to classify the food items as a group? Are you able to classify the non-food items as a group? The other thing is that it allows you to classify an item according to the nature of the characteristics. Different items have different characteristics. So when you are coding your item, it is always important for you to classify your items using the various characteristics. It also allows you to avoid duplication and confusion. So when you're using a code, it is always easy for you to avoid confusion. Therefore, coding is very important in that the organization does not confuse the items. The other thing is that it enables you to fix essential parameters to specify an item. So you are able to come up with various characteristics that will ensure you specify your items. What are some of the advantages of coding? Coding plays a very important role, and one of the advantages is that when you are using codes, it is very easy for you not to repeat your description of items. Basically, the long names are cut into shorter names. The other thing is that systematic grouping for correct identification of similar items. So you're able to identify similar items more easily. The other thing is to avoid duplication stocks of the same items. So you are able to ensure you don't duplicate items of the same characteristics. The other thing is that it reduces the size of varieties. When you had many varieties, you can decide to put them together to form one variety. Therefore, it allows variety reduction. It also ensures standardization of materials. So you are able to come up with a similar characteristic of a particular material, therefore standardizing the material. The other thing is it allows you to be accurate in corresponding of records and posting of receipts and issues in appropriate records. So basically accuracy is very important when you're using a code. You just scan the code and you're able to be accurate even in your records and receipts. The other thing is that it allows you to store materials, to sort the materials and document them more easier. So basically coding allows you to document your materials more easily. It also allows you to locate your materials more easily. So locating of materials become easy. It also helps the accounting and costing. So when you're having your code in place, once you scan the items, they already go to the system automatically. So when you want to do your accounting sometimes and costing, it becomes very easy. It also allows useful purchase department to select suppliers. So you'll be able to select your suppliers depending on the various codes of a particular supplier. It is also very important when you're doing communication of information about materials. Remember, when you're coding your materials, you're putting information to that code. Therefore, when you just click the code will be able to communicate information for you. What are some of the disadvantages of coding? One of the disadvantages is that sometimes you can make a mistake when you're writing your code. Once you make that mistake, it will be very difficult for you to correct the code. So it is always good for you when you are doing your coding, it is very important for you to be very, very accurate. The other thing is that coding may be misunderstood. So when you're coming up with a code, sometimes some people might misunderstand the code, and this can bring issues to your organization. The other thing is that when large number of code is used for different materials, There may be confusion, and it may be difficult to locate the materials without knowing. So when you have large number of codes, so sometimes it's always very difficult for you. So when you're coding your materials, therefore, it is very important for you to make the codes to be as simple as possible. The other thing I'm going to talk about is store vocabulary. When large number of materials have been given codes, it becomes difficult to remember all of them. For easy referencing, the organization publishes the codes and names them in a book, and that book is what you are referring to as the store vocabulary. So when you have large number of items and every item must be coded, sometimes remembering all those items is very difficult, and this therefore necessitates the organization to come up with a store vocabulary for storing all those codes. Therefore, when you need the codes upon request, you are able to get the items. So what are some of the systems of coding? We have various systems of coding, and this includes the numerical system, the alphabetical system, mnemonic system, alphanumeric system, the decimal system, and the color coding. So let's start with the numeric system. The numeric system uses numbers when coding. So basically you are using units or numeric numbers when you're coding your materials. In alphabetical system, you are using letters when you are coming up with symbols or codes for particular items. You can decide to use alphabet numbers depending on the organization. The other system is called the mnemonic system. So mnemonic system starts with alphabets as codes, and this helps in memorizing the codes. So mnemonic system starts with alphabetical, and this allows you to easily memorize the codes. Alphanumeric, on the other side, uses both alphabets and the numbers, as the name suggests. You use alphabets and at the same time you use numbers. Then you have the decimal system. The decimal system uses decimal numbers to come up with the codes of particular items. And lastly, you have the color coding. Under the color coding, they normally focus on the color of items, and this is very common in electrical fittings. This is because they use the colors to come up with various codes. So what are some of the methods of coding? We have various methods of coding. The first one is coding by the nature of items. You can decide to code by the nature of items, e.g. raw materials, both parts. So depending on the organization, some organization base their coding by the nature of items. The second one is coding by the end use, the final use of the item. You can decide to code using that system. Basically, in this one, production item may be coded differently from the non-productive or non-production items. You can also decide to code by reference to the location system. So you can decide to code using the location where you are taking the items from. Let's say you are taking the items to Kisumu. You can decide to start with Kisumu. Or if you are taking the items to Mombasa, you can decide to say Mombasa, like that. So depending on the location where you are taking the items to. Or the other thing is you are basing your coding on the source of supply. If you are buying items from Bidco, you can decide to code the items depending on the source of supply. Let's say you are taking you can say Bidco 01, or you can say Kappa 02. So depending on the source of supply, depending on the supplier who is supplying to your organization, you can also decide to base your coding on the final customer who is going to buy the final products. If the customers are ladies, for example, you can decide to say LAD meaning ladies. If they are men, you can decide to say MN meaning men. So depending on your customer who is going to purchase the items from you. Thank you for listening. Let's meet next time, same place, to talk more about supply chain management issues. Thank you.